Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome in here to Kurt Magoosh Sports. And this is one of the biggest hires in Michigan history. And this is Jesse Minter becoming the defensive coordinator at the University of Michigan. We know that Josh Gattis and we know that Mike Macdonald both left this team. We know that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo, we know that they have left this defense. But for Michigan, I mean, Mike Macdonald, what an improvement he was over he was an incredible improvement over Don Brown in that defense. And even Dwayne Haskins was able to light up Michigan both times they were able to play. Justin Fields and some of those wide receivers at Ohio State were able to have great success on the University of Michigan. And then this year, C.J. Stroud stepped into Michigan, and that defense was phenomenal. So Michigan, you look at Michigan this year, and against Iowa in the Big Ten Championship, they were tremendous under Mike Macdonald. Against Penn State, when the offense wasn't very good, they held Penn State and Sean Clifford to 17 points. So the modernizing of Michigan's defense, you can attribute Michigan and their jump to the way that they played aggressive style defense in that 4-3 with Mike Macdonald being an aggressive and, hyper intense defensive coordinator. And now Mike Macdonald is an NFL defensive coordinator, and he will likely be in the run for head coaching jobs if his trajectory continues to impress like it has. So you look at this for the University of Michigan, and a lot of guys have already said this, but with Jim Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh was a year away from being fired. Jim Harbaugh desperately wants to go to the NFL because he hates the fact that you can, literally, raise a kid from 18 years old, 19 years old, and then he hates probably this transfer rule. And he doesn't like that Texas A&M now and other schools are legally paying players huge amounts of money to play. And he realizes that Michigan's in a really tough spot because now he set the expectations so high that it needs to beat Ohio State, beat Penn State and Michigan State, and win its division every now and then, and it has to win the Big Ten Conference, which it could do, but it's going to be very difficult. But then when you get to the college football playoff, you're going up against Texas A&M, you're going up against Georgia, you're going up against SEC defenses that are just literally unfair, and SEC athletes. So for Jim Harbaugh, he believed that he took it to the pinnacle of Michigan's success, but he looked at the NFL, he looked at the landscape, and Jim Harbaugh has a unique personality where Jim Harbaugh's really intense. So Jim Harbaugh wasn't able to convince the Wirfs family that he was going to Minnesota, and he thought he was going. He told staffers he was going to the Minnesota Vikings. It didn't happen. So now in comes Jesse Minter to try to rework this staff that has completely fallen apart. And then with Josh Gattis and the miscommunication on the upcoming coaching search, which could have happened between Jim Harbaugh and, between Josh Gattis, if Jim Harbaugh ended up getting the Vikings job, now Jim Harbaugh has to fill out the seats of a very good offensive coordinator and an elite one in Mike Macdonald. Losing Mike Macdonald to take over for Wink Martindale in the National Football League, that doesn't really hurt because, again, John Harbaugh gave Jim a great guy in Mike Macdonald. And Mike Macdonald had a jackpot in terms of the guys that he was able to develop in terms of being at the University of Michigan. But now Jesse Minter comes in. His father is Rick Minter, who is a longtime, I believe, college football coach. Okay, so he comes from a great coaching background, all right? So looking at Jesse Minter, again, his father was a pretty popular coach. He spent 5 seasons at Indiana State, which is a tough FCS job because you're going up against the likes of North Dakota State, You're going excuse me. You're going up against Northern Iowa. You're going up against South Dakota State. When you play in the Missouri Valley Conference in football, it is a really tough conference, and you're there in Paradise. So again, he took his lumps there, which I'm very impressed with. All right. So he was with a really good defensive coach in Clark Lea and Vanderbilt. He learned there last year. He was the Vanderbilt safety coach and also a defensive coordinating assistant. He was at Georgia State also for 3 seasons. So that's very impressive. He was at Georgia State. Believe that's in Statesboro, Georgia. No, excuse me, it's in Atlanta, Georgia. So he was there for 3 years. Then, like Mike Macdonald, for 3 years, he was in the NFL. From 2017 to 2020, he was in the NFL. He was a defensive backs coach in the National Football League for a very long time. And Clark Lea, ended up looking at Jesse Minter. So in terms of the way that he coaches defense, I think he coaches mostly in cornerback development, and he coached Marcus Peters and Anthony Averett and Jefferson and, some really good defensive backs at Baltimore. So he learned a heck of a lot. I really like this hire. He's 38 years old. He's young. He comes from the Baltimore Ravens like Mike Macdonald. His dad was a coach, and he's really worked his tail off. At Indiana State, at Georgia State, he had some success, and this is a guy, again, that John Harbaugh really liked coming from Georgia State, as he was able to take that program and really help them elevate their status. So I expect to see some really good coverage from Michigan. Will we see some exotic pressures? Maybe. But again, playing in the SEC, seeing the types of offense that are run in the NFL, but also the way that, Vanderbilt, they had to go up against Dan Mullen. They had to go against Josh Heupel. So they did go against some very modernized, fast offenses in the SEC East. They also even went against Mississippi State, the ultimate air raid. So I believe that Jesse Minter's seen a lot. It's going to be important who he surrounds himself with, but I think he does have a chance to succeed, and he does have a chance to stick around for a couple of years. I don't want to see Jesse, again, if Mike Macdonald gets hired, imagine if he goes back to Baltimore. But again, this is a very exciting hire. It's not an older retread hire. It's not going to be like Chief John Chavis going to Arkansas, after his best days were behind him. This is a 38-year-old that could be entering into the prime of his coaching career in Jesse Minter. And I think it's a pretty exciting hire for Michigan. I see a lot of upside in this hire. The more you read about him, the more you like Jesse Minter. So, again, I think it's a pretty solid job for Harbaugh as he's trying to put together the staff. I'm very, very curious to see the direction that they go to supplement Jim Harbaugh on the offensive side of the football. But for right now, Minter, again, we're going to have to see what it's like watching a defensive-led team with Minter. We might have to go look at Georgia State film. If you're a Michigan fan, try to look at Georgia State and some of those other defenses that Minter was a part of. But he was around Wink Martindale, so maybe you can expect some exotic pressures. He probably knows Mike Macdonald. He absolutely does from his time in Baltimore. So, again, and John Harbaugh has spent 3 years with this guy. He will do right by his brother. So this is an awesome, awesome landing spot for a desperate Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines.